There is one other type of filter, and it's not strictly speaking a filter. It's a visualization. And this visualization is called a slicer. And what it does is it goes through, slices data which affects all visualizations on a particular page or in a particular report. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete a few of these items, and I'm going to insert a slicer in the spare gap. So it's the one just to the left of the table with a little filter symbol on it. So just click there, and I add what I want to be potentially sliced or filtered. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the date. Now notice the difference between these two, at least at the beginning. Here we have a list of years and the sales volume. Here we have absolutely no measures. It is just a list of the fields. And this particular list is being shown in a style which allows for visual manipulation as well as entering the dates. So let's see what happens when I go to the slider and I move this across. You'll see that all of the visualizations change. And you can also see that overall the bottom two also change as well, that we set up in the previous video. It used to be just South Yorkshire and Tyne and Wear, and now it is Merseyside and Tyne and Wear. Similarly, I can change the end date, and you can see everything changing. We can enter the dates direct. So we have a calendar picker. Wherever you get to enter dates, you usually have the option of a calendar picker. So I'm going to say the 1st of the 1st, 2000 to the December 31st, 2009. Now all of these can be shown or not shown based on the formatting. So here we have the slider, so we can turn that off or on. Here we have the date inputs. We can't turn those off or on, but we can change the size and the fore color and the back color, for instance. We can add a header. There already is a header, but we can change attributes about it, including outline. So whether we're going to have a box around the title or not. I'm going to add a title to this. So filter by dates. There we are. And I'm going to middle align it again, center it. And actually, no, I'm going to have it blank with a white background as before. So this affects everything that is in this particular page. Now, similarly, I could have a filter or slicer, that is to say, based on something else. So if I have a slicer, don't want to change that to a slicer, I need to deselect it first, add slicer. I'm going to have a slicer based on the region name. So here we have a series of tick boxes, and notice here I'm just being allowed to select one particular item or all of the items. You'll see that I can add a select all, and I can turn off the single select, so I can select multiple items. But by default, this particular slicer, which I'll just blow up a bit, I have to go down to the items and increase the font size. this particular slicer, by default for text, only allows you to put one particular item. So if I can do this for individual items, or do it for a range of dates, can I do it for measures as well? So let's put into a new slicer the sum of sales volume. And indeed, you can see, yes, we can, operating fundamentally like the date. So we have numeric inputs as opposed to the date inputs in the formatting that we had previously. But everything else is the same. Now, looking at the formatting of the slices, you can turn the slider on or off. You can adjust the font for the values and the background color, and you can turn the slicer header on or off. However, there's more interesting things in the slicer settings. Now, they used to be in this drop-down arrow, but they've now moved to the Format Visual pane. So with the slicer settings, you can change the style so that it is between two values, or you can have a vertical list, a tiled list, a drop-down, and you can say you want it not between, but from the beginning all the way up to a certain value, or from a certain value all the way up to the end. So between is the default, where you've got these two circles, whereas less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, you have just got the one circle. For text, you can have a vertical list, a tile, or a drop-down. And then for dates, you can have the vertical list, tile, between, which is the default, before and after, which as previously removes one of the circles. You can have a drop-down, and you can also have relative dates. In other words, within the last day, week, month, or year, whether it is 365 days or a calendar year, and you can have relative time. So within the last few, so you can say how many minutes and hours. So this is how you can insert a slicer. You can just go to slicer and drag it in where you want, and then add the field, and then you can go to Format Your Visual and format the slicer setting so it is as you wish. Now, there's just one thing about this particular slicers. I've arranged this so that this is just for 2000 to 2009. Let's have a look at the matrix. The matrix continues from 1995 to 2016. This slicer is not affecting anything other than this one page. Now, this following feature I'm about to show you has actually been added moderately recently, certainly not right at the beginning, and allows for slicers to affect a single page or multiple pages. Now, you'd think it would be somewhere in the visualization, so you'd be somewhere in the format of the visual tools. It's actually in view, and it says sync slicers. So that creates a new pane, and here we have, what is this going to actually represent? What is this going to change? Is this going to change the visibility? Or is it going to change the synchronization of it? Is it going to, in other words, are you going to see it? And are you going to be able to sync? So the advantage of being able to see it is if I check the matrix and go to the matrix, you will see that the same filter, the same slicer is being shown. So it's not a different slicer, it's not two independent slicers. If I change this to 2001, you'll see that the slicer on this page hasn't changed. So why is that? Because this slicer, whilst affecting this page, is not connected to the rest of slicers. So if you want this slicer to be the same as this slicer, then you need to check this box here for the page that it's on and sync. So now let's change this so it's 2002. And you'll see that this slicer now is 2002. So it's a very odd quirk that when you introduce a slicer, it is visible on the page, but it will only by default sync to a particular page, and not when you have the sync to additional pages will it be the same slicer. It's very confusing. So if I were you, when I insert a new slicer, so I'll just insert another date slicer just here, and go to sync slicers, the first thing I would do is check this box, which is this particular page, the page that it's on, and whether it's syncing. Because the rest of it doesn't really make sense. Now you can have a slicer filtering on a page, in other words, it will do the slicing, but you can't see it. So suppose this slicer filters this bar chart, so I'll just go back up so you can see that this bar chart goes from 1995 all the way to 2015. So if this slicer affects the bar chart, it can do that. So I'll take that to 2000. We'll now see that this starts at 2000, but you can't see the slicer. So something on page 1 affects the bar chart, and you can't see what it is. So this causes a problem, of course. I'm just here, I'm looking at this bar chart, I see that it is filtered because I know my data range starts at 1995. Okay, why is it being filtered? Okay, I'll go into my visualizations, I will go to my filtering, and there's no filters whatsoever. What's going wrong? Help! So with that, I then have to look at the remaining of the pages and see if there is a slicer which is synchronizing to that particular page. So it might be you want a slicer that synchronizes to all pages. Great, so just check, check, check. Job's a good one. I'll just insert a new page, go back to this slicer, and you see it's not selected. So any new pages you add, you have to go back to the initial slicer and go check if you want that slicer to be synchronized to this new page. So I'll just get rid of that page by clicking on the X next to it. So slicers, a very simple tool, but something that can have big impact across not just this one page, but across all the pages. And the key thing to remember once you've inserted the slicer is to go to View, Sync Slicer. It's a bit out of the way, so you have to remember that it is there. Let's add a slicer. So we add a slicer based on the date. I will use my View Sync Slicers, and I will synchronize the matrix page to it as well. I will take this up to 2002, and we can see that the matrix is so affected. I'm now going to delete the slicer. So you can see this slicer here, this visualization, 1995 to 2015, 1995 to 2015, or 2016 even. Go to the matrix, it starts at 2002. So the slicer which has been deleted is still affecting this matrix visualization. And you can't see any photos in the page level photo or the report level photo. So really, it is a very dangerous thing to do, to have a slicer which is synchronized and yet you then delete. So if you find yourself in that sort of situation, you can always press undo several times if you can, or you can insert another slicer which affects the matrix. So this one should affect, there we go, we're now at 1997, and reset it that way. But just a word of warning, before deleting any slicers, make sure that they are not affecting any other pages, or you might find yourself with an unexpected photo that you can't seem to get rid of. So how can we get rid of the effects of a slicer that we can't see? The solution is to see it. And to do that, we go into View and Selection. So this shows all of the objects which are on this page. Currently, you can see 2 of them. However, when I click Selection, there are actually 3. We have the matrix, so that is this, which you can see here. Photo by days, this is the slicer that we can see. And then we have a further slicer. Clicking on that doesn't actually highlight it because it is invisible. And you can see it's invisible because we've got these little eye icons, which when you click on it, you can hide it. So what we need to do with this slicer that we can't see is unhide it. So click here, and now we can see the slicer. We can adjust the slicer so that we now start with 1995, and then we can delete the slicer. So if you've got a slicer that you've previously set up, synchronized to more than one page, and then deleted the slicer, to be able to see it again, to delete it, you need to go to View, Select.